Good morning. Still hard for me to believe after working with Game and Fish about 22 years that they still pay me to come to work every day. It's a wonderful job working with all different kind of habitats from the Tennessee line down to the Gulf Coast and with a bunch of cool critters. But my presentation today is going to be on habitat requirements and some timber management stuff that we do on state lands that we own. I'm also going to go over some conservation units specific to the gopher tortoise and some of our state properties and federal properties that are within those conservation units. You're looking at now a map of the conservation units. Of course, Conservation Unit 1 is in the listed part of the range. 2, 3, and 4 are outside in the proposed listing part of the state. This is Fred T. Stimpson Sanctuary in Clark County. That's the shape of the WMA or sanctuary, overlaid on the latest version of what is considered to be highly suited, less suited, and moderately suited soils for the gopher tortoise. That's version 6.6 on the soils. You're looking at Fred T. You can see that there's a fair amount of soils. That's about a 5,500 acre area within the red polygon. You're looking at probably half of that's in suitable soils for the gopher tortoise. This is Upper State Sanctuary, about 15 miles to the north above Jackson, again in Clark County, bordering the river. You can see there's a good bit of soils on it too that are well suited for gopher tortoise. That's a 1,920 acre property. Again, there's probably somewhere between 800 to 900 acres of suitable soils on that unit. And these are going from Conservation Unit 2 all the way across to 4. I should have said that earlier, but we're going to start in the west and move east. This is Perdido WMA. This is actually owned by our sister division, State Lands and Forever Wild Board owns this property. You can tell, I hope you can, it looks good on the screen up there, that there's a good bit of suitable soils on that. There is some dissection in there with creek drains and stuff, but that's another piece of state-owned property that we'll be looking at doing some work on. Moving into Conservation Unit 3, this is Conecuh National Forest, and that's the administrative boundary. That's not what they own. That's the admin boundary of the forest, so their ownership is a little bit smaller than that. It got a little jacked up, so I didn't put that in there. This is the Solon-Dixon Center that's within the admin boundary of the forest, again there in Conservation Unit 3. Moving across to Conservation Unit 4, this is Barber WMA, Barber and Bullock counties. The very northern part of the WMA is actually maybe 1,000 acres. It's in Bullock County. And as you can see, you're getting to the very northern extent of the range of good soils and good range for gopher tortoise. Not a lot of opportunity to be had on Barber other than on the southern end of it. The next one is what we call a Geneva State Forest WMA. For any of the older people in here, that used to be commonly called Covington Wildlife Management Area. It's in Covington in Geneva County. The eastern side, the eastern polygon that you see there is owned by the Alabama Forestry Commission. That they graciously let us run a WMA on that for public hunting. They've got good habitat there, good soils, and they've done good management over the past probably close to 100 years on that tract. The western part of that is owned by the Division of Wildlife and Freshwater Fisheries, and we bought that in 2 different parcels from Rayonier in 2015 and 16, I think. Could have been 14 and 15, but prior industrial forest, but it still does have some power line right-of-ways on it that has tortoises on it. And of course, as Roger said in his presentation, some tracts, you know, you end up, the tortoises get pushed out into the road edges and linear openings like right-of-ways and stuff and food plots. This is Fort Rucker. Also got some good soils on it, and I think in the northwestern side of that, if you look, there's some of the darker green, which is the best suited soils, and that's the county line. When you get to the west of that, you'll see that it starts falling off, but I think those soils are probably the same. That's just an anomaly with that soils mapping. The reason I wanted to start with that little preface of what we've got as far as public lands, and that's not all of them. There's going to be a few more tracts that I think we can deal with. The soils is really the backbone of what this critter needs to be able to make a living. You know, you got to have that good, well-drained, friable soil that they can actually excavate their burrows in. This is a picture of Fred T. Stimpson there in Clark County, and we actually do log fairly often on our properties. You can see in the background, the reason I got this slide pulled up and picked it out is you can see that good sandy soil in the foreground. You can see a little bit of the timber cell that we're working in. You can see across the road what that was before we started working in that stand. It's pretty dense and closed up and not affording a lot of the requirements for gopher tortoises to make their way there. Shifting over to some pretty decent gopher tortoise soils up in Barber and Bullock County on Barber WMA. Just wanted to get a good look at some of those soils. Really what we need to do, probably looking at this, and I'm guilty of it myself, is if we want to really get some good return for this critter, we really need to focus on those soils that are best suited and make sure that that's where we're putting our management dollars towards trying to conserve the gopher tortoise. You know, the return, as far as the gopher tortoise is concerned, is going to be high on those soils that are best suited for it. Of course, that return for the gopher tortoise is going to decrease once you get to a less suitable soil for the tortoise. This is just another shot of some young longleaf there at Barber WMA. Of course, you can see the road bed. That's a good sandy site. That's a dormant season photo. This is the same stand a couple of years earlier than that, but a growing season photo, showing some good understory habitat there. That same dormant ground cover look. This is a stand that the tortoises don't really care what species is on top of them as far as overstory species. Of course, we'd like it to be pine, where you've got the pine needles help carry the fire, but this is a mixed slash and loblolly stand there at Barber. You got the good open canopy habitat, and of course the understory on that one, it was getting ready to be burned. That was followed up with a growing season burn not long after this photo. There's the photo. You couldn't tell it in the distant shot, but we underplanted that tract with longleaf, and the longleaf are doing well, and trying to get the prescribed fire out there on it. And that's, Roger touched on that too. That's what I told him. He took a little bit of the steam out of mine, but the prescribed burning side of it, we're as guilty as anybody else. Burn capacity is a tough thing to get, even with us trying to emphasize it. You only have so many burning days, especially if you're looking at dormant season burning. So we shifted a few years ago to trying to do more growing season burn on suitable sites for it, trying to broaden that window to get fire on the ground. Another shot of that stand from a road bed there, County Road 47, where we was conducting that burn. This is a 32-year-old loblolly stand that's right across the road from the previous slide. It's just on the other side of County Road 47. You know, that stand has been thinned to a low basal area and burnt on a regular rotation. And that moves us into what we really are wanting to look at. We're wanting to get a good herbaceous understory. You can see that's good sandy ground. That's some of the best soils that we've got on the management area at Barber, although it's on the northern end of the range. So, I mean, but we try and do what we can there. But that's the focus on trying to get that open canopy, is to put that productivity down there at gopher tortoise level. You know, you hear people talk about quail and turkey poults. You know, you got to get down on that quail and turkey poult level. Well, that's where the gopher tortoise lives forever. So you got to get that productivity down on the level that they can take advantage of it, and use regular prescribed fire to keep that in check. This is a planted longleaf stand that you can tell it's getting towards the outer edge of being good. You know, that's scheduled for a prescribed fire to set that growth back underneath that planted longleaf. We have shifted to a lot of longleaf on our state-owned lands just due to the typical fact that you can get away with getting prescribed fire in those stands earlier that you couldn't in most other pine species suited for this end of the country. It's early dormant season shot of some herbaceous growth there in a longleaf stand, the end of the first growing season. Wanted to shift over and talk about site prep. In chemical site prep, we do a lot of chemical site prep, but most of the time we try and back off of using any aggressive tank mixes, broad spectrum herbicides that could well, basically, if you end up doing that, sometimes you can set back the forage availability for these tortoises for, I've seen it as much as 2 growing seasons. And that's pretty important for a tortoise that has a lot of resources, you know, made in putting burrows underground, if you end up taking that forage availability off for them. Single herbicide applications, pretty good. Arsenal's a good one. Mazapir. I know for some of the industry folks, and there's a handful of them in here, you know, when you're planting species, and especially like I was saying earlier, you go to a more moist regime in your soils, you're going to end up getting more species of competition. And for most of the industry folks, it's, you know, wanting to get those trees free to grow, but we also want to try and retain some of that at all times possible to be able to be used by the gopher tortoise. We do look on the management area, area control. We try and sometimes select smaller stands, or if we do a thinning or a clear cut for restoration purposes to longleaf, we may not site prep that entire tract in year 1. We may do a third of it this year, get it planted, get it recovered back to where it's providing forage, and then we'll do another third a year or 2 later, and maybe the last third, you know, at year 3. We will burn through those to keep that succession level down to where it can still be easily got with herbicide. We'll keep it down with fire, but oftentimes we try and use that area regulation not to take off the forage for the tortoise all in one season. Mechanical site prep, we do not use a tremendous amount of that on our WMA system on public lands. I don't think it's as prevalent as it once was. We have used it in the past in areas that we knew that we did not have gopher tortoises and had the need for shearing and piling and root raking. But heavy site prep on occupied sites is it can be. I'm not going to say it can't be done, but if I was going to do it, I would probably try and go out and locate all my burrows that I could, When you're doing that, you're going to probably be locating adult burrows. You're really not going to find those little hatchling and juvenile burrows that are really more susceptible to ground disturbance than the adults are. I have seen adults dig out before from some mechanical site prep months after it was done. Invasive species, Roger hit on it too. We need to start using, a lot of prescribed fire, as much prescribed fire as we can get out, but don't be afraid to use herbicides. I was saying be careful on what you use in the site prep, but if you've got invasives or you've got, some mid-story canopy or shrub layer that you're trying to get out and it's taking you a while to get that with prescribed fire, don't be afraid to use some herbicide. Just be smart about what you're using. The tree planting, we do all our planting with hand crews. We haven't used any mechanical tree planting in a long time. Same concerns as far as the heavy equipment for like mechanical site prep. The entombment of gopher tortoises would be a concern. If you are using heavy equipment and during your logging operations, you really want to be cognizant of what you're doing around the apron and the burrow entrance. Like I said, we try and flag off most of our stuff when we're working on it, skidders and feller bunchers and stuff, even though they've got low ground pressure tires. If they are up on the apron or on the burrow entrance, they can collapse those entrances, and during the hatchling season, you can also crush eggs or hatchlings. The shot I've got on there, that's one of our old assistant chiefs, David Hayden, and this photo was actually taken down at when we used to call Geneva State Forest Covington WMA, so it's been quite a few years. But the real thing that I wanted you to look at in this is looking past David. In the immediate foreground there, that's Kogon grass. This is right off the edge of a road. That's Kogon grass, and of course, that's a plantation loblolly, and then you get back off into there. You see that is full of hardwood brush and some yopon. You can see over the truck door there's a few longleaf seedlings that are trying to make a living right there on the side of the road. But that's the thing we've got to figure out is not only on our own land, but with our industry partners, TMOs and REITs, is how to successfully manage both for a working forest and for the gopher tortoise at the same time, because state lands are not going to be able to, state or federal is not going to be able to bear the brunt of precluding the listing on this species. Wanted to follow that up with something that looked good, good understory in it. That's what we need to be striving for, and we definitely try and do that on our state properties. Basically, our timber management philosophy is we want to thin to promote an open canopy and is allowing all that sunlight to get down onto the forest floor to get that productivity down there at gopher tortoise level. We like to keep mid-story on tracks that we're managing for this, and this is also good quail habitat, especially if you're doing a little bit of a dirty burn in there and leaving some stuff for nesting cover. But we get those burns in there to stimulate herbaceous ground cover, and we just try and maintain that thinning and burning regime over time. And finished up with a shot of a preparatory cut there on Fred T. Stimson that was basically done for gopher tortoises back maybe 10, 15 years ago.